Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islamic Audiobooks collection. I will be reading Stories of the Prophets by Ibn Kathir, which we downloaded from kalamullah.com. Let's read. Page 74. Joseph's Master. What we see as hazards and slander is the first step of the ladder on Joseph's way to greatness. Allah is decisive in his action. His plan is carried out despite the plans of others and while theirs are still being made. So he spoils their plan and Allah's promise is realized. Allah has promised Joseph prophethood. Love for Joseph was thrust into the heart of the man who bought him, and he was a man of no mean position. He was an important personage, one of the ruling class of Egypt. Therefore Joseph was pleasantly surprised when the chief minister of Egypt ordered his men to remove the heavy shackles from his swollen feet. He was also surprised when he told Joseph not to betray his trust. He would not be ill-treated if he behaved himself. Joseph smiled at his benefactor, thanked him, and promised to be loyal. Joseph felt at ease, for at last he was sheltered and would be well cared for. He thanked Allah over and over and wondered at the mysteries of life. Not so long ago, he had been cast into a deep, dark well with no hope of ever coming out alive. Next, he was rescued, then enslaved in iron shackles, and now he was moving freely in a luxurious mansion with enough food to enjoy. However, his heart ached with longing for his parents and brother Benjamin, and he shed tears daily. Joseph was made the personal attendant of the chief minister's wife. He was obedient and ever obliging. With his pleasant manners and charming behaviour, he won everybody's heart. Joseph's handsomeness became the talk of the town. People referred to him as the most attractive man they had ever seen and wrote poetry about him. His face carried immaculate beauty. The purity of his inner soul and his heart showed in his face, increasing his beauty. People from afar came to the city to have a glimpse of him. The prettiest of maidens and the richest of ladies thirst to possess him, but not once did he show haughtiness or conceit. He was always humble and polite. Joseph's qualities. The days passed and Joseph grew. Almighty Allah said, "And when he, Joseph, attained his full manhood, we gave him wisdom and knowledge, the prophethood. Thus we reward the doers of good." Qur'an 12 verse 22. He was given wisdom in affairs and knowledge of life and its conditions. He was given the art of conversation, captivating those who heard him. He was given nobility and self-restraint, which made him an irresistible personality. His master soon knew that Allah had graced him with Joseph. He understood that Joseph was the most honest, straightforward, and noble person he had met in his life. Therefore, he put Joseph in charge of his household, honored him, and treated him as a son. Zuleikha's feelings for Joseph. The wife of the chief minister, Zuleikha, watched Joseph from day to day. She ate with him, talked with him, listened to him, and her wonder increased over the passage of time. Joseph was soon confronted with his second trial. The chief minister's wife, Zuleikha, could not resist the handsome Joseph, and her obsession with him caused her sleepless nights. She fell in love with him, and it was painful for her to be so close to a man, yet be unable to hold him. Yet she was not a wayward woman, for in her position she could get any man she desired. By all accounts, she must have been a very pretty and intelligent lady, or why would the chief minister have chosen her of all the pretty women in the kingdom? Although she bore him no child, he could not take a second wife, as he loved her passionately. The Qur'an raises the curtain on the scene of this fierce and devouring love on the part of the lady. Allah the Almighty told us, "And she, in whose house he was, sought to seduce him to an evil act. She closed the doors and said, 'Come on, O you.' He said, 'I seek refuge in Allah, or Allah forbid. Truly, he, your husband, is my master. He made my stay agreeable, so I will never betray him. Verily, the Zalimun, wrongdoers, evildoers, will never be successful. Indeed, she did desire him, and he would have inclined to her desire had he not seen the evidence of his Lord. Thus it was that we might turn away from evil and illegal sexual intercourse. Surely he was one of our chosen, guided slaves." Qur'an 12, verse 23 to 24. Joseph's feelings for Zulaykha. Commentators are unanimous about her intention of disobedience, but disagree about his own intention. There are those who say that she tempted him and he tempted her to sin, although he did not follow through with his intent. Others say that she merely wanted him to kiss her, and he attempted to strike her. Yet others say that this anxiety had been there before this incident. There was a psychological disturbance in Joseph when he reached adolescence, which Almighty Allah rid him of. The safest commentary for us is that there is temptation and resistance in the verse, for he Most High stated, "And indeed she did desire him, and he would have inclined to her desire." Qur'an 12 verse 24. Abu Ubaidah said that this is a temptation and resistance, meaning that she had tried to seduce him. Had he not seen the proof of Allah, he would have been seduced. This is in keeping with the infallibility of prophets, as it suits the words which immediately follow. Thus, it was that we might turn away from him evil and illegal sexual intercourse. Surely he was one of our chosen guided slaves. Qur'an 12 verse 24. This verse proves that Joseph was an upright worshipper of Allah. It also testifies to his rescue from the authority of Satan. The Almighty said to the devil, Iblis, on the day of creation, "Certainly you shall have no authority over my slaves, except those who follow you of the Ghaween, Mushrikeen, and those who go astray, criminals, polytheists, and evildoers, etc." Qur'an 15 verse 42. Zulaykha's false accusation. Joseph's refusal only heightened her passion. As he moved to the door to escape, she ran after him and caught hold of his shirt, like a drowning person clinging to the boat. In her tugging, she tore his shirt and held the torn piece in her hand. They reached the door together. It opened suddenly. There stood her husband and a relative of hers. Almighty Allah said, "So they raced with one another to the door, and she tore his shirt from the back. They both found her Lord, her husband, at the door." Qur'an 12 verse 25. As he opened the door, he saw her husband standing in front of him. The sly woman immediately changed her tone to anger, and showing the torn piece of the shirt in her hand, asked her husband, "What is this recompense, punishment for him who intended an evil design against your wife, except that he be put in prison or a painful torment?" Qur'an 12 verse 25. She was now accusing Joseph of molesting her to give the impression that she was innocent and a victim of Joseph's sexual desire. Though bewildered Joseph denied it, "It was she that sought to seduce me." Qur'an 12 verse 26. The shirt was passed from hand to hand while she watched. The witness, her cousin, looked at it and found that it was torn at the back. The evidence showed that she was guilty. The disappointed husband remarked to his wife, "Surely it is a plot of you women. Certainly, mighty is your plot." Qur'an 12 verse 28. The wise and just Aziz apologized to Joseph for his wife's indecency. He also instructed her to beg Joseph's forgiveness for accusing him falsely. Allah the Almighty narrated this incident thus: He, Joseph, said, "It was she that sought to seduce me." And a witness of her husband bore witness, saying, "If it be that his shirt is torn from the front, then her tale is true, and he is a liar. But if it be that his shirt is torn from the back, then she has told a lie, and he is speaking the truth." So when he, the husband, saw his, Joseph's, shirt was torn at the back, her husband said, "Surely it is a plot of you women. Certainly, mighty is your plot. O Joseph, turn away from this. O woman, ask forgiveness for your sin. Verily, you were of the sinful." Qur'an 12 verse 26 to 29. Zulaykha is ridiculed by the people. An incident like this cannot remain a secret in a house filled with servants, and the story spread. Women began to see her behavior as scandalous. They remarked, "The wife of Al-Aziz is seeking to seduce her slave, young man. Indeed, she loves him violently. Verily, we see her in plain error." Qur'an 12 verse 30. Zulaykha's plan to regain her reputation. Naturally, their gossip distressed Zulaykha. She honestly believed that it was not easy for any woman to resist a man as handsome as Joseph. To prove her helplessness, she planned to subject the women to the same temptation she faced. She invited them to a lavish banquet. No one so invited would want to miss the honor of dining with the chief minister's wife. Besides, they secretly harbored the desire to meet the handsome Joseph face to face. Some of her close friends jokingly said they would only come if she introduced them to Joseph. The invitation was restricted to ladies. The banquet began, laughter and mirth abounded. Etiquette dictated that the ladies not mention the topic of Joseph. They were shocked, therefore, when Zulaykha opened the topic. "I have heard of those who say I have fallen in love with a young Hebrew man, Joseph." Silence fell upon the banquet. At once, all the guests' hands stopped, and all eyes fell on the chief minister's wife. She said, while giving orders for the fruit to be served, "I admit that he is a charming fellow. I do not deny that I love him. I have loved him for a long time." The women's reaction to Joseph. The confession of the chief minister's wife removed the tension among the ladies. After finishing their dinner, the guests began cutting their fruit. At that very moment, she summoned Joseph to make his appearance. He entered the hall gracefully, his gaze lowered. Zulaykha called him by his name, and he raised his head. The guests were astonished and dumbfounded. His face was shining and full of manly angelic beauty. It reflected complete innocence, so much so that one could feel the peace of mind in the depth of his soul. They exclaimed in astonishment while continuing to cut the fruit. All their eyes were on Joseph. So it was that the women began to cut their palms, absent-mindedly, without feeling that they had cut them. The presence of Joseph at the scene of drama was so effective that blood flowed without their feeling pain. One of the ladies gasped, "Good gracious!" Another whispered, "This is not a mortal being." Another stammered, patting her hair, this is but a noble angel." Then the chief minister's wife stood up and announced, "This is the one for whom I have been blamed. I do not deny that I tempted him. You have been enchanted by Joseph, and see what has happened to your hands. I have tempted him, and if he does not do what I want of him, he shall be imprisoned." The women's reaction, Qur'anic. Almighty Allah related the scene of the banquet in his words. So when she heard of their accusation, she sent for them and prepared a banquet for them. She gave each one of them a knife to cut the foodstuff with. And she said to Joseph, "Come out before them." Then when they saw him, they exalted him at his beauty, and in their astonishment cut their hands. They said, "How perfect is Allah, or Allah forbid. No man is this. This is none other than a noble angel." She said, "This is he, the young man, about whom you did blame me for his love, and I did seek to seduce him, but he refused. And now, if he refuses to obey my order, he shall certainly be cast into prison, and will be one of those who are disgraced." He said, "O my Lord, prison is more to my liking than that to which they invite me. Unless you turn away their plot from me, I will feel inclined towards them and be one of those who commit sin, and deserve blame, and those who do deeds of the ignorance." So his Lord answered his invocation and turned away from him their plot. Verily, he is the all-hearer, the all-knower. Qur'an 12 verse 31 to 34. That evening, Zulayha convinced her husband that the only way to save her honor was to put Joseph in prison. Otherwise, she would not be able to control herself or to safeguard his prestige. The chief minister knew Joseph was absolutely innocent, that he was a young man of honor, a loyal servant, and he loved him for these reasons. It was not an easy decision for him to put an innocent man behind bars. However, he was left with no choice. He reasoned that Joseph's honor would also be safeguarded if he was kept out of Zuleika's sight. That night, with a heavy heart, the chief minister sent Joseph to prison. Joseph's time in prison. Prison was Joseph's third test. During this period, Allah blessed him with an extraordinary gift, the ability to interpret dreams. At about the same time, two other men landed in the prison. One was the cupbearer of the king, the other was the king's cook. The two men sensed that Joseph was not a common criminal, for an aura of piety glowed on his face. Both men had vivid dreams, and they were anxious to have them explained. The king's cook dreamed that he stood in a place with bread on his head, and two birds were eating the bread. The cupbearer dreamed that he was serving the king wine. The two went to Joseph and told him their dreams, asking him to give them their meaning. First, Joseph called them to Allah. Then he said that the cook would be crucified until he died, and that the cupbearer would return to the service of the king. Joseph told the cupbearer to remember him to the king and to say that there was a wrong soul called Joseph in prison. What Joseph predicted did happen. The cook was crucified and the cupbearer returned to the palace. After the cupbearer returned to service, Satan made him forget to mention Joseph's name to the king. Therefore, Joseph remained in prison for a few years, but he made patience his own, praying to Allah. Joseph's time in prison, Qur'anic. Almighty Allah narrated, "And there entered with him two young men in the prison. One of them said, 'Verily, I saw myself in a dream pressing wine.' The other said, 'Verily, I saw myself in a dream carrying bread on my head, and birds were eating thereof.' They said, inform us of the interpretation of this. Verily, we think you are one of those muhsineen, doers of good. He said, no food will come to you in wakefulness or in a dream as your provision, but I will inform in wakefulness its interpretation before it, the food, comes. This is of that which my Lord has taught me. Verily, I have abandoned the religion of a people that believe not in Allah and are disbelievers in the hereafter, and I have followed the religion of my fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and never could we attribute any partners whatsoever to Allah. This is from the grace of Allah to us and to mankind. But most men think not, i.e., they neither believe in Allah nor worship Him. O two companions of the prison, are many different lords, gods, better, or Allah, the one, the irresistible? You do not worship besides Him, but only names which you have named, forged, you and your fathers, for which Allah has sent down no authority. The command or the judgment is for none but Allah. He has commanded His monotheism. That is the true straight religion, but most men know not. O two companions of the prison, as for one of you, he, as a servant, will pour out wine for his lord, king or master, to drink. And as for the other, he will be crucified, and birds will eat from his head. Thus is the case judged, concerning which you both did inquire. And he said to one whom he knew to be saved, mention me to your lord, your king, so as to get me out of prison. But Satan made him forget to mention it to his lord, or Satan made Joseph to forget the remembrance of his Lord, Allah, as to ask for his help instead of others. So Joseph stayed in prison a few more years. Qur'an 12, verse 36 to 42. That is it for today. Jazakallah khair for listening.